In part 2 of our video focused on using the circle of fifths to predict how many sharps or how many flats are found in a key signature, we're going to review how the circle of fifths work for adding sharps and look at the counterpart system of how we predict how many flats are in a given key signature if the scale indeed uses flats. So if we use the example of D major here, the first thing that we do is we find out how many times we need to count up a perfect fifth from C major in order to get from C to D. So if we do it once, C, D, E, F, G, there is our first perfect fifth we get from C to G, and then if we do this again, G, A, B, C, D, that's two perfect fifths that we need to count from C in order to get to D, and because we counted two perfect fifths, we add two sharps to the key signature of D major, which according to the order of sharps, Father Charles goes down and ends battle. That means that the two sharps we would add to D major are going to be F and C. In this counterpart video, we're going to look at the system of how to determine how many flats are in a given key signature. Now, if we find the number of sharps by counting up perfect fifths from C major, this time we're going to move in the opposite direction and count down a perfect fifth from C major, and every time we move down a perfect fifth, we are going to add one flat to the key signature following the order of flats, which is battle ends and down goes Charles Father, if we remember the mnemonic. So I always find it a little bit more difficult to count backwards from C rather than forwards, so don't be afraid to actually count on your fingers. So if we go backward from C, C, B, A, G, F. So here, our first flat key is actually going to be F major, and every time we count down a perfect fifth from C or back a perfect fifth from C, we add one flat. So F major is going to have one flat, and that flat is going to be B flat, which is what we see here. And likewise, every time we move down a perfect fifth from F major, which is our first flat key, we add one more flat to the key signature. So here, if we count back from F major, F, E, D, C, B, we end up with B major. Now, this is why we normally start with sharps first, because we can see that there is already a B major, which is a sharp key. So what exactly do we have to do with this B major here? Well, if we look at F major, we can see in F major, all Bs are normally flat, which means that we wouldn't be looking at B major, we would be looking at B flat major. And because we have gone down a perfect fifth from C major once, twice, this means that B flat major is going to have two flats, which according to the order of flats are going to be B flat and E flat. And from there we begin to see a pattern. So if we count backward 5 pitches or down a perfect fifth from B flat major, B flat, A, G, F, we end up with E major. But yet again, we already see on the sharp half of our circle of fifths, there is already an E major, and we recognize that in the key signature of B flat major, all Bs and all Es are flat, which means that this wouldn't be E major, this would be E flat major. And because we have gone down a perfect fifth once, twice, thrice, this means that E flat major is going to have 3 flats, which in the order of flats are going to be B flat, E flat, and A flat. And if we continue this pattern down, count backward from E 5 times, E flat, D, C, B, A, and again, we already have an A major, so we can designate this as A flat major, because again, in E flat major, all A's are flat, and because we have gone down a perfect fifth 1, 2, 3, 4 times from C major, A flat major is going to have 4 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat, and at this point we have technically completed our entire circle of fifths, which begs the question, is the sharp half larger than the flat half? And ignore the fact that halves are supposed to be equal, but we will see that that is indeed true. So we can actually keep going on the flat side, and it doesn't contradict what we have seen in the sharp side because of what we're about to see. So if we start from A flat major, which has 4 flats because we've gone down 4 perfect fifths from C major, if we keep going and count backward from A flat, G, F, E, D flat major, we see something interesting here. We recognize, if you remember the locations of black keys on the piano, that C sharp and D flat are indeed the same note or the same pitch on the piano, which means that C sharp and D flat are actually the same key signature, in that you would play the same pitches on the piano in order to produce both major scales. But we see with the bottom of the circle of fifths here, there are 2 different ways to write each of the scales. So for example, instead of writing C sharp major as 7 sharps, we could write it as D flat major, which we can see is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 perfect fifths down from C major, and therefore D flat major is going to have 5 flats: B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. And if we continue along the circle of fifths using the flats pattern, we see that the same type of alternate spellings of F sharp major and B major also come true. So if we count backward from D flat major, D flat, C, B, A, we end up with G flat major, and on the piano, F sharp and G flat are spelt as the same pitch. And because G flat major has come down 6 perfect fifths from middle C, G flat major is going to have 6 flats, which are B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, and C flat, and we have 1 more key signature to go. So if we count backward 5 pitches from G flat, F, E, D, and we end up back with C. Of course, we know that this is not C major because C major is our starting key signature with no sharps and no flats, and it can't be C sharp major because we're talking about flat keys here. So we recognize that in G flat major, C will always be flat. So if we counted backward 5 from G flat, we would end up on C flat, which is actually on the piano the same pitch as B, and so our circle of fifths works in both directions, whether we count sharps or whether we count flats. So because C flat is 7 perfect fifths down from our starting pitch of middle C, there are going to be 7 flats, meaning simply that every pitch is flat if we are writing a major scale based on C flat. So if we do that, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, and F flat. And like that, we now see that our circle of fifths is now complete, regardless of whether we add sharps or whether we add flats to our given key signature. And in the follow-up videos, we're going to actually do a few examples of practice, both in terms of constructing scales and identifying the key signature based on the starting note, and looking for a shortcut to go the other way. If you're given a key signature, what is a short way that we can use in order to identify what the starting pitch of the scale is without needing to go through the whole circle of fifths in order to figure it out?